Hey everyone, it is time to continue our expert series. So let's welcome Matt Seamus to the show. How you doing, Matt?
I am doing great, Michael.
Awesome.
How are
So
you?
I'm doing all right, except I read an article about 20 minutes ago that kind of shook me because it's very different than the message I've been hearing. So I wanted to share it with you in context, and then hopefully the technology will play and I'll actually share it with you and the audience. But the net of the article is 25% of New York City's rent stabilized apartment buildings, 25% of the tenants have not paid rent since March. So that's 4 months going on 5 months. Eviction moratorium has been extended by their governor another month or two. They're not forgiving rent. They're taking the rent and making it a consumer debt or judgment, like medical debt that I've seen on people's credit. So I thought we should talk about this. It's very, very different than what we've been hearing, or at least I've been reading. Multifamily, strong collections, 95, 96, 97%. When I go back and think about those 90 plus articles, they do put a little asterisk saying, Class A. So I'm wondering if we're just getting the tales of two markets, right? Class A is fine, but I'm not even sure what rent stabilized buildings mean in New York, but I'm guessing not Class A. So does that, what in that jumps out at you?
Oh, yeah, I have not seen this article, so I'm curious to dig into it a little bit more with you. Um, I I would take rent stabilized to mean that the building is a stabilized asset. It's
Mm,
got tenants in it, occupancy maybe above 90%.
okay.
Um, and an unstabilized building might be one that's partially vacant or brand new and being leased up. So you can't, if you have a brand new building that was just completed and it's only 2% occupied because people are just starting to move
Mm.
in, you wouldn't want to include that in the numbers. That would be what I would assume.
Yeah, that could be. I think this is New York and San Francisco. I think they mean by rent stabilized, rent controlled. That's
Okay.
how I'm reading it. But I mean, it wasn't clear. I've read the article twice. Let me bring it up. So let's hope technology behaves and we can look at it. So hopefully you're seeing it now, or at least shortly.
Yep, I see it.
So I actually highlighted a portion of this, and the source is Bloomberg Business Week. So, you know, argue what you want, but there it is. I've highlighted. Hopefully that came through. A quarter of the city's apartment renters haven't paid since March, according to Community Housing Improvement Program. Look at that acronym, CHIP, a group that represents mostly landlords of rent stabilized buildings.
Hmm.
That's scary. A quarter. And below here, it says something about there's also 17% vacancy. So when I do the math, that puts economic occupancy like at 60%.
Yeah, I was. That's what I was gonna. Well, there was another sentence there that was talking about how
Where'd it go?
landlords are running out of cash.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, because it's again, you're covering a building and it's an apartment. So you got to think 10, 15, 20. It's probably not the biggest apartments, but yeah, it's,
Right.
stuff still breaks, right? I have a tenant that's not paying for COVID and all this reasons. They had a $4,000 roof mount AC go out. I still had to
Oh
fix it,
wow.
right? I can't say sorry, sucker. You're not paying, so I don't have to fix it. No, I have to, I still have to plunk down $4,000, get a crane, take the old one off, put the new one on. This starts off with a 25-year-old Jessica Lee and her husband plus four roommates. So that's six people living in a a 4-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Yeah, that's lots of roommates. That's rent. One good
That
thing
is.
is a year from now, rent's going to be cheaper in New York. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you seen? Maybe this article says something about what rents are doing in New York. I know they've decreased substantially in San Francisco.
They certainly have
Uh,
fallen. And I think I think this is just more proof that the big vertical cities are in trouble.
yeah.
Um, this article goes on. It talks about, of the six roommates that we just highlighted, one of them has already moved back to West Virginia to live with their parents. And there's going to be a lot of people that not only are in this situation where they lost their restaurant jobs, which is really what this article is about. Other people with jobs are being told by their employers, you don't have to work here anymore. So they're going to move out. So I thought we should talk about things like this, that, 25% not paying.
Yeah, that's a big number. I mean, and I just from doing our own, when we do a multifamily acquisition, one of the things that we do is project our break-even, our cash flow break-even occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to, let's say you acquire a property and it's 95% occupied, how low could your occupancy go
Mm-hmm.
for you still to be able to service the debt and not, be in trouble with your lender?
Yeah.
And that number can vary depending on the deal, but generally, you're probably around maybe 80% occupancy when you start to get into trouble from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah.
So this at 75% occupancy or economic occupancy, at least, you might have warm bodies in the building, but they're not paying you.
Right.
That would be a problem for many, many landlords, particularly anyone that has debt on the property.
Yeah, I mean, let's just play this out for folks. I don't think many people agree. And I just found the line where it talks about vacancy at 17%, right? This case, it's a New York University in Manhattan. Their students aren't coming. So let's play this out. Let's round it to 20% so the math is easier. Let's say you have a 100-unit building, right? And check my math and let me know if I'm just wrong, because you do this a lot more than me. So if you have 20% vacancy, that means you have 20 units out of 100 with nobody in them, correct?
Or nobody paying, yeah.
Well, that's no, vacancy first.
Yeah.
Then you have 25% of the 80 not paying. So what you do is you take 25% of the 80, so you whack another 20. So you have what is called a economic occupancy of 60%. Is that correct?
Correct. That's right. That'd be a pretty bad situation. And I'll say this too. One of the things that we do when we're stress testing a potential deal is we look at these scenarios, these really extreme downside scenarios like what you're going through, and we try to determine where is the break even.
Right.
It's a way for us to be able to gauge how much cushion we have in the deal. And it's important to share with investors too. And it's important for anyone that's putting money into any opportunity, I think, to know, here's how much we could afford to, here's how much cushion we have, how much we could afford to decrease occupancy before we start to get into real trouble. Most scenarios though, don't contemplate 60% economic occupancy. That would be a World War III catastrophic scenario that you generally just would never expect to happen. So I think that if that is true, it's certainly true on some properties, right?
Yeah.
Of course, there's always going to be properties that are in bad shape for one reason or another. But if that is true, and you had a reasonable degree of confidence that was possible to happen during your ownership period, it would be hard to pull the trigger on buying a proproperty like that. So
there's no way at a 60% economic occupancy, you could have any debt on that in cash flow. You would have a hard time in some buildings if it was free and clear, turning a profit. I mean, that's nuts.
Yeah, that's right. Especially in high property tax states.
Yeah.
And, it's actually even worse if you have high physical occupancy, but low economic occupancy, because you still have people in the property. They're still, the property is being exposed to wear and tear.
Yeah.
It's being exposed to tenants are potentially, if tenants, for instance, don't pay their own water bill, they're still consuming water. And so those are operating expenses that you as the landlord take on. And when you have the combination of a high proportion of your tenants not paying you rent or reimbursing you for operating expenses, and you don't have any control as a landlord to evict those tenants, that's a really, really challenging situation.
Yeah. So what I thought we would do is, again, this is one article. We've read it. Well, I've read it twice. You've seen half of it. But I thought we should talk about, because there's really 5 people that will be impacted by this, 4 negatively, and then one will be very happy. But I thought we'd go through the 4 painful ones first and then close with who's going to be happy.
Please.
So,
okay.
yeah, let's talk about the tenant first, right? So the tenant today, as that article talked about, they're not in an immediate threat of eviction because of the moratorium, right? So they will have a roof over their head for the next couple of months, even though they haven't paid since March. Fact. What isn't being talked about is those tenants who are on the lease are very likely going to get a judgment, which will ultimately hurt their credit and make it more difficult to get the next place. True?
Completely agree with that. Not to mention, I mean, yes, there's also, there's an emotional toll. There's a stress, physically and emotionally, on someone that, is skating around the rules of the system. And I think that's probably something that people are going to feel too.
No,
but yeah,
you're right.
I think short term, the tenants are probably feeling okay. Tenants in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think longer term, though, you're right. The prospects are going to be bleak. It's going to be harder for them to find a replacement property to live in.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to likely have a positive referral from their current landlord. You're right. Their credit score may be affected. There's all sorts of ripple effects there.
Yeah. And again, I've been thinking about this for like the hour since I've read this. Is my guess is this is going to be very painful on their credit and the ability to get a place probably for the next year or two. But as a landlord who sees lots of credit statements, my guess is in 2 years, I will see these judgments and I will write them off like healthcare issues.
Yeah.
So maybe in 2 years, it won't be as big an impact because everybody has one. But boy, that next place is going to be tough. You're going to probably have to do double deposit, probably have to downscale quality. It's going to hurt a tenant, I think.
I think your previous point, though, is going to depend on the market that you're in and, who's applying the pool of applicants that are looking to rent the property that you have available.
That's true.
You're not going to, yes, you may be willing to overlook poor credit in certain situations. But when you have 10 applicants and 6 of them have good credit, no blemishes or no significant blemishes, and 4 of them have meaningful blemishes even from a couple of years ago, you're not likely to select those 4. So the tenant is really not helping themselves in the long term here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to stay 7 years, right? Is it typical stays for 7 years? Is there?
What's that?
The judgment. It's on their credit for 7 years.
That I don't know.
I think it's 7. It might be 10. I don't know. But yeah, so the tenants, again, I think the tenants, it's going to be a long-term negative. Short-term, they're going to be okay. They're not going to be living on the street in the short term. Mm-hmm. But I do think this is going to unfortunately it's going to be a long thread, long rope. I don't know what the statement is, but it's going to carry for a while. Yeah. So let's talk about the owner next. I think the owner is feeling immediate pain. Immediate, like now.
Yep.
And I only can speak for myself. I mean, I thought one of the things, again, I'm in California, not like New York, this article, but it was really interesting when our governor said eviction moratorium, all of that stuff. But, oh, by the way, he still wanted all my property taxes paid.
Yeah.
I thought that was, that did not feel right? No, you can't collect rent. You can't evict them, but gosh darn it, give me my property tax revenue. That was interesting. And then, oh, by the way, just like I said, right, my $4,000 roof mount AC went out in a unit that's not being paid. I still had to fix it. So I think owners are feeling the pain right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think this whole kind of article resurfaces in my mind and begs the question of how much overall pain is there going to be, and how far into the pain are we today?
Yeah, exactly.
I think those are two questions that no one knows. No one knows, and there are forces fighting the, specifically Congress and the Fed, who are attempting to minimize the pain for as many people as possible, and attempting to kind of almost push out and flatten the pain curve.
Flatten the pain. That's good. Creative. I like that.
But we don't know. We don't know how much pain there is going to be, and we don't know how far into it we are. And so, like, as a specific example, before we continue talking about the property owner or the landlord, a tenant who can no longer make their rent payment because they were laid off, theoretically should have access to unemployment benefits. And the unemployment benefits have been plentiful, and there's the enhanced unemployment benefit, program, which is set to expire at the end of July. If you are not making your rent payment, if you were unemployed and not making your rent payment, there's something seriously wrong there. I mean, there don't seem to be. I'm not sure what the excuse is, because there are resources available to everyone in that situation. And like you said, sometimes there's a difference between the headlines and what maybe you're experiencing in the real world. And generally the headlines are more negative than what I personally am experiencing. And I think the same for you, but that doesn't mean you can completely discount them. We should understand what, what they're saying and what people are reporting is happening elsewhere. But that doesn't also mean that is destined for your portfolio.
Yeah. It's back to your pain curve. I think one of the things, again, I'm just playing, again, this one article, again, as I opened up, shook me because it is completely opposite of everything else I've seen about multifamily. 180 degrees different, right?
Yeah.
And I just have to ask myself, is there something going on either side that I'm missing, right? Either it's too rosy or too negative, and the answer is probably always in the middle. But this is the first one that just shook me. I knew this kind of pain was out there. I did not think it would be citywide. 25% of New York City not paying rent. That's frightening to think about. And I'm hoping it's some kind of skewed, arbitrary number to make it look bad, but it's frightening to think about for sure.
Yeah, it is.
So let's talk about, because again, I talked about 4 people being hurt. We've only hit 2. The next one is going to be the city and the state, right? City and state. We've talked about property taxes earlier. They are going to see many landlords who are at 60% economic occupancy simply not pay their property taxes. Yep. In addition, what they're likely to see is some forced sales and values falling probably for a couple of years. And again, most states or property taxes are based on value. And oh, by the way, they're already running deficits and their future is even bleaker. So am I misreading that the pain for the city and state is going to come for years?
No, I think that's probably right. I think your property taxes are something that you can, just practically speaking, when you look at your expenses, property tax is something that you can not pay for a while. You're going to incur a penalty and you're going to pay a little bit more when the time comes. But, or if you say, man, I'm really in trouble, I'm not going to pay these and I'm going to go try and short sell or fire sale this property, we'll deal with it at closing. I mean, the new buyer can pay the property taxes because I think that's certainly going to happen. I would expect property tax revenues or collections to be down
significantly.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of the other links in the chain there. I think any expense that is, you're gonna just like anyone else, any other business or personal budget process, you're going to prioritize the expenses that are absolutely necessary. And while property tax certainly is necessary in the long term, you can go for a while without paying it. So I think people will kind of force rank their expenses and say, what can I not pay right now? And anything that has a reasonably low consequence, they're not going to get paid for now.
Yeah. And then the last one that's in pain is going to be banks. I mean, we joked earlier that this building at 60% economic occupancy would barely cash flow if it had no debt. I mean, there are banks, even if they did a conservative 60% LTV, they're in trouble, right? Their owner may not be in a position where they can make mortgage payments, and they're probably out. If it's a big enough building, they're out of loan covenants and all of that.
Yeah.
My guess is there will be some banks who learned their lesson last time and just sell the debt for a discount. And then some buildings will be short sold or foreclosed. So banks are in trouble. They're the fourth link in the chain, I think, and they're going to be hurt. And that's years in the future, right? Owners are hurt now, tenants are hurt next year, cities for years, and then banks. Bad debt, man. Bad debt's coming.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we talk, lender and bank kind of can be used interchangeably, but specifically with multifamily, you have the agencies, which are Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are kind of the primary lenders for large multifamily properties. And what happens is, instead of a bank either holding on to the loan on their balance sheet or selling it, what Fannie and Freddie do is they take a batch of these loans and then go securitize them and sell them to Wall Street. And we or someone, an investor, buys them. And then eventually the investor has the exposure to if that loan is to default. And one thing that I have been looking at is default rates across asset classes, and then also across certain markets. And so what has happened so far in this pandemic and this kind of crisis is the ones that you would expect to be defaulting that's hospitality and retail. Those are the two by far highest default rates for commercial loans.
I'm seeing the same thing. Yep.
When you look at default rates for the other two major asset classes, which are industrial and multifamily, they're really, really low. Industrial actually is lower than it was 6 months ago. The default rates are lower than they even were 6 months ago. Correct. Multifamily, I can't remember exactly, but they're very, very.
It's under 2%. It doubled, but it's still under 2%. Right? It was.
Yeah, and
0.9 to 1.8, something like that.
Right. So, I think default rates are something to watch, but they're a bit of a lagging indicator.
This is exactly what you said. We flatten the pain curve, right? I can see the chains linking up now where there's going to be a spike in pain for multifamily, but it's probably quarters down the line.
Because it takes time, right? Yeah. Like the first thing that happens is your tenants stop paying.
Yep.
Then the next thing that happens is you try to restructure with your lender.
Well, let's play this one out for sure. Tenants stop paying. First off, you call your bank and you get 90 days like that.
Yes.
Okay. So that's 3 months.
You can certainly do that.
Yeah.
You can certainly do that. So your tenants stop paying. Yep. You call your lender and say, listen, I'm having trouble. Yep. Can we enter some period of deferral or forbearance? Generally, the lender is going to say yes.
Yeah, at least for 90 days. Yes.
So we're in that period for a lot of people.
Yes.
Then after that period of 90 days, either your tenants resume paying or they don't.
Right.
And depending on what happens there, you need to go have the next conversation with your lender and say, well, my tenants are still not paying. In fact, the ones that weren't paying but still living there are now slowly moving out. Yep. And maybe you're in a situation where you don't have new tenants moving in.
Yep.
So now you need to go figure out what the lender needs to determine what their tolerance is for working out the loan with you as the borrower.
Yep.
And, that really, I think, is going to depend. I think we're really only just getting started with those conversations en masse.
Yeah, I think they're like within the next 45 days where those conversations are going to happen, because I think most lenders were very willing to give 90 days because of this once in a lifetime event. I've already had one subscriber of my channel who had a owner occupied house, not government backed, have their lender come back month 4, which just happened 2 days ago, and says you owe 4 months. So none of this tacking on the back 0%, because it wasn't a government-backed loan. So yeah, I think it is happening right now, and it will happen for the next 45 to 60 days, where we're going to find out, do banks want to work with owners? Do they think they're lost causes and they want to sell the debt? I think the pain curve, it spikes in 45 to 60 days. So it's what is that? September, I guess.
Yeah, end of the summer.
Yeah.
So then I think that begs the question, is this on the radar of decision makers?
God,
Is this on the radar of the Fed and of the Treasury and of Congress?
Well, hold on. The other wrinkle in this is, let's assume the extra federal unemployment is not extended or it's significantly reduced.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have been paying and are unemployed that won't pay if that kicker is not there, right? Have we hidden a lot of the stress in multifamily through the end of July? That's another concern I'm starting to have.
No, I think that's right. And I that's what I was attempting to articulate.
Got it. Sorry.
In the, like, push the pain curve out a bit, which is, yeah, I mean, people are on unemployment, they can still afford their rent. Mm-hmm. And therefore they're able to make their rent payments. And therefore the landlord doesn't feel much pain. Yeah. Certainly not the same pain that the headlines might suggest. Yep. But what happens when that unemployment, enhanced unemployment benefit runs out? If there are jobs for people to go back to, then that's a positive thing, because some proportion of those people will go back to jobs. But they're not going to, certainly nowhere near 100% of jobs are going to be available. And there are people that are going to enter a different phase of life where they don't want to, they're going to decide to move. They're going to decide to downsize. Yep. They're going to decide to move in with family. So yeah, there's certainly going to be effects once this stimulus of unemployment benefits runs out. If I had to guess, my bet is that nationally we extend the unemployment benefits for some period of time. Mm-hmm. But going back to my previous question of, is this on the radar of the decision makers? Mm-hmm. I think it is. Okay. And I think that these are, when you start talking about multifamily, especially across the country, you talk about it as an asset class. Mm-hmm. It's a large number. Mm-hmm. It's a large amount of money that is tied up in that asset class, and it's critical infrastructure for people. Yep. And so I think there will be an incentive just structurally at the national level to figure out a way for as few multifamily projects to default as possible. I'm speculating. Yeah, I'm speculating. But this is maybe this is the optimist view, right? So, I do think that if and when this pain starts to become realized in, kind of en masse, I would be very surprised if there wasn't serious discussion about how to limit it and how to, just backstop the free fall.
Yeah, I think the other thing I've put together is I think we're going to have two pain curves, right? We have the one pain curve that we've just now talked about being in September, but I'm just now thinking we're going to have a second pain curve, second wave, like in January, if unemployment is not extended, right? Because we have a batch of people that have been doing okay, and then July stops, then we'll be in pain. So if you play the same duration, right? Tenants not paying, get 90 days, they're still not paying. We could have a second wave in January, February that is larger than the first wave. So you're right. These ripple effects could be real. So, well, let's flip the script a little bit. So the tenants hurt, owners hurt, city and state hurt, banks are hurt, but there's always private equity. There's always people with pockets, cash that can buy distressed assets and hold long enough to play it out. So I don't know about you, but I've heard, dozens of distressed funds being created, 50, 100, 200 million dollars, that are salivating for opportunities like this. So there will be, where there's pain, there will be some winners, and some people will buy once in a lifetime priced assets, is my guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% right. And that means you and I and you, anyone listening or watching, we need to figure out how to put ourselves in that position.
Yeah. And I think number one is patient capital, right? Because I still think the pain curve that we talked about has been pushed. It's still out there,
Yeah.
and potentially a second wave that's even bigger into next year. So don't be in a rush. If you're new, learn your market, see what's going on. But just to put this into context, I bought a 10-unit bill. I bought two of them side by side from two different sellers during the peak of the 2010 crash for 220 grand, 22K a door. They're worth 70K a door today. I mean, they're, and they were probably worth 60K a door at the last peak before I bought them, right? So they're here, they come down, they come back. So there will be once in a lifetime deals out there, but it's going to take patient capital. It's going to take reputation and getting out there, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also, just like this crisis is exposing businesses that have fundamental flaws or fundamentally are not trending in the right direction. Maybe, like I just saw Brooks Brothers filed bankruptcy today. There's not as many people wearing suits as there were 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I think just using that as an example, not to pick on them, but using that as an example, the businesses that are over leveraged, the businesses that have a model that is outdated are being exposed by this pandemic. Same thing with properties. Not every property, still needs to be occupied. Not every property still needs to exist. And so there's going to be a group, a category of properties that it doesn't matter how low they're being offered for, they're not worth buying. And I think that's an important skill, to have, or an important tool to have in your toolbox, is to be able to differentiate between, wow, this is at a great price, this is great value, versus, wow, this is really cheap.
Yeah, that's a good point. Things. Yeah, that certainly is. So the last thing I want to say on this kind of staying on the rosy side of the equation is, I could tell you 2 years from now, maybe even 18 months, if not sooner, rents are going to be substantially lower than they are today, right? If you're in a city where people are leaving, the supply retrades at different price points, you can rent it at different rates. So I'm guessing that 4,000 rent that we highlighted in the Bloomberg article could be 3,200, 3,000 in a year once it goes through the whole pain point, because that's what happens. If occupancy goes down, what do? You lower rent so you can fill it up. Kind of classic.
That's right. And when occupancy goes down and you're a tenant, and you're looking to go, you're a prospective tenant, you're looking at different apartments, you're not going to go to the worst apartment on the street. You're going to go to the slightly better location. You're going to go to the slightly more upgraded property, because it's probably going to be a little cheaper than what it was before. And so again, the kind of the worst assets in the worst locations are going to feel this more than anyone.
Yeah, couldn't agree. So thank you for doing this. This was great. This is an article you hadn't seen, so I appreciate you just dancing with me. It is the pain curve. The pain curve's out there. I think owners feel it. Tenants next, city and state, then banks. So it's going to be interesting to watch.
Michael, thanks for having me. And I just want to mention, I just today downloaded your audiobook. So I'm going to listen to that. I've been meaning to do it for a while, and I just wanted to mention it to you, to give you a little shout out.
Oh, I appreciate that. If you like it, make sure you leave a 5-star review on Audible for me.
I love it.
But if you don't like it, don't worry.
Maybe I'll give you a live in-person review that we can record.
Oh, I would love that. That would be wonderful. All right, man. Thank you very much. That's so awesome. Thank you.
All right, Michael. Take care.
Yeah.